AI and the automated society that we're building right now are headed for UBI, which is Universal Basic Income, and you don't want to get caught as a free-range chicken living in a 15-minute city. So stay tuned and we'll talk about how you can avoid that happening to you. So Zach, what the heck is a UBI and why wouldn't I want to live in a 15-minute city? I mean, I'm told that in a 15-minute city, you're 15 minutes from everything that you want. Food, museums, art exhibits, hotels, whatever it is you may want, you're only 15 minutes away from it. In a 15-minute city, if you're living on a universal basic income, then that means that somebody else is paying your bills in a city where you're designed to stay in one tight little spot. It really sounds like what we call a free-range chicken. Thanks, Andy. I love the saying, free-range chicken. You're still owned by the farmer, but you can walk around and you feel like you're actually free. But when the time comes, a farmer can still put you on the chopping block. So how might a UBI come about, you ask? Because you sound crazy, Zach. Well, here's the thing. A UBI can come about in many different ways, but I think that the way it's probably going to play out is that over the course of 2026, we're going to see a lot more jobs being displaced by AI. The majority of the displacement we see is probably going to be in white-collar jobs. And everybody says, oh, well, I'm a blue-collar worker. I don't have to worry about that. But you forget as a blue-collar worker, because I am one. As a mechanic, I know that the person who pays my bills is the person who I service and I serve. And my clients are primarily white-collar workers. So if all of the white-collar people don't have jobs anymore and they can't pay us blue-collar guys to do the work that they can't do or haven't learned how to do or don't know how to do or don't want to do, then who are we going to make an income from? So this economy is going to hit all of us. And the thing is, as a blue-collar worker with a good skilled trade that it's taken years to develop, you're going to be way better off than a lot of people who don't have those skills, who don't have those tools, and who don't have those trades. But that's not all that you're going to need to protect you from this economic turmoil that we're going to face for years before they even institute a universal basic income or a long-term unemployment. Because what I think is really going to happen is I think we're going to go with a long unemployment. When the unemployment numbers get really high, the government will do kind of like a bailout, and it'll be a bailout for the taxpayer in some kind of way to keep everybody propped up so that we don't have riots in the streets and the government doesn't falter. And that's important. Even the wealthy people who run things behind the show with their puppeteering, even they don't want people rioting in the streets. They want to make sure everybody's fed. They want to make sure everybody has a place to live. Maybe not everybody, but enough to keep from having social unrest. And if the economy tanks and we lose 30% of jobs, and that's 30% unemployment, that's like way back to 1929 era unemployment. We're talking about soup kitchens and bread lines. And then the housing market begins to collapse because houses are being repossessed at an alarming rate greater than they were in 2008. And the stock market crumbles worse than it did in the stock market, crash of 2001 after the dot-com bubble burst or after the housing crisis in 2008, 2009. If it crashes worse than that, then everyone's going to suffer for a period of time because government acts really slow. And even if the government figures out a way to wiggle all these numbers around, and generally speaking, I'm a libertarian, so I'm not saying this is free stuff. But the way that it is the government manipulates everything around eventually because they don't want riots in the streets. So they'll find a way to extend unemployment. They'll make unemployment a livable wage for a period of time. And then as that goes, they'll try to stimulate the economy and get people back to working. And when people don't get back to working and more money goes into automation and more money goes into AI, what's going to happen is the labor force is going to continue to shrink as far as the people who actually have jobs, and the number of people who are unemployed will continue to expand. That employment will turn into like a long-term unemployment, and that long-term unemployment will turn into a universal basic income. And you'll be able to afford to live on a universal basic income within a 15-minute city. That's kind of the idea of what we're probably headed for. Now let's talk about how you can keep yourself from becoming a free-range chicken. The one thing I can tell you about your freedom is that you don't want other people making decisions for you. When somebody else makes decisions for you, you're at their mercy. And mercy is never something you want to be at as a self-reliant, self-proclaimed human being. So you don't want to become that free-range chicken we're talking about. If you move into the 15-minute city and you live on a universal basic income and you don't have any assets and the only thing that you have is what's given to you by the government and by the corporations who own all the technology now and the powerful elites who control all the technology and pull all the strings, then pretty soon we're all going to be sterilized, living in a 15-minute city with giant cage walls where we're just fed some type of slop like something out of 1984. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to eat that stuff. Ugh. So assets, that's really the name of the game. Skills and assets. Building a small business that can work in the middle economy, because I think we're going to have like a weird economy that's going to happen right in the middle of all this going on. As the economy starts to tank, you're going to see independent businesses, sole proprietorships, and small businesses are going to start to expand again. And we're going to see a large boom of them because people are going to be doing anything they can to survive. And when you can't find a job going to job interviews, you start to figure out a way to get money on your own. And that's how small businesses form. And so I think in the middle, we're going to have like this weird interim economy where small businesses and individual sole proprietors are going to be the ones who are like the middle class for that period of time. And I'm not saying they're going to be living well and that there's going to be a lot of money. They're not going to be able to go afford brand new trucks and stuff, but they'll have enough money to keep in their home. They'll have enough money to store up some assets. They'll have enough money to get through the initial onslaught of what happens. And then when we get through it, they can use those assets to keep themselves independent and not have to live in a 15-minute city. So what I want you to do is I want you to skill up every day. Learn something new. Find a way to buy and acquire assets. Assets that are not going to change value if the economy tanks. If you buy a Pokemon card and the economy goes completely sour and it goes completely south and every one thing is crashing down around everybody, how many people do you think are going to pay big money for that Pokemon card? Because the number of people willing to buy it just went down from, I don't know, millions to a couple people that would be willing to spend the money in that type of economy. And that lowers the price and value of it. Now, something that will maintain value, though, is something like gold or silver, precious metals. Some collectibles are still going to maintain value no matter what you do because the upper echelon of society will always want fancy sports cars. They're always going to want memorabilia from war and weird stuff like that. But you want to diversify your portfolio. Get yourself some assets and some stocks. Stocks tend to not tank as much as people think when the economy goes south. As a matter of fact, you should have a way to quickly buy a bunch of stocks because if the economy takes a really big tank, when it hits the bottom is when you want to buy. Because eventually the United States economy and the world economy will creep back up and get back to the level that it was at. So if the stock market tanks by 70% or something because everything's falling apart and the world is crumbling around everybody and everybody's worried that they're going to die, well, if that happens, that's when you're supposed to buy. Warren Buffett talks about how you buy when people are selling. And when it hits the bottom of the market, it's the best time to buy. I talked in another video about how if you have a stock that's worth $100 and it sinks down to $1, the last thing you should do is sell it at $1. As a matter of fact, you should be checking over the financials, see what the stock is actually worth, and then you should be thinking about purchasing a bunch more stock because it'll probably go back up to that $100 at some point. With that being said, what I really think you should focus on is you should focus on tooling up. Get yourself some tools, get yourself some knowledge, get yourself some experience. Build a brand, a business, and an income stream now. I don't care if you're doing junk removal. I don't care if you're writing books and selling them on Amazon. I don't care if you're doing t-shirts and selling them online. I don't care if you're baking cookies for the local neighborhood. I don't care if you're growing crops or raising dogs or raising some type of food animal or chickens or whatever. Do something to bring in extra money. Start doing it now. Take that money and start stocking that money up and get that money ready to go into a fund that you can use as your fund for when the hits the fan, okay? I'm trying not to curse on this channel. I've told you guys that before because I want kids to be able to watch it. I want young people to feel comfortable with it. And I want it to be family friendly. I'm not trying to block anybody off of this channel. It's primarily geared toward young men or men between the ages of like 15 and 55 or 18 and 55. Generally speaking, anybody can watch it. Women can watch, young kids can watch. Anybody should be able to watch this content because it's not meant to be adult content. It's meant to be content that helps you and helps everybody else in your life. Remember, this channel is all about learning, doing, and teaching. When it all comes down to it, you don't want to get stuck in a 15-minute city because a 15-minute city is going to be a place where you have zero freedom. You don't want to get stuck on a universal basic income. And I'm not saying that we're not going to need a universal basic income. I'm saying don't get stuck on a universal basic income. If you get a universal basic income, you'll probably be able to work a certain amount on the side. So if you have some type of skill or tool, even if you don't want to actually work full-time anymore, you could still work a little bit on the side to have a better life if you live in a 15-minute city. That may not be true. I don't know. But the one thing that I know for sure is our economy is changing, and it's changing fast. And if we don't get prepared for what's coming, then we're going to be up a creek without a paddle, and it's going to be a poo creek, okay? That's it. Go out there and learn something, do something, and teach something. Ta-ta for now.